Well, thank you everyone for attending this excuse me, this Power Hour hosted by JBS International for the OJJDP Continuums of Care project. You are being recorded. Uh I will turn it over to Andrea Dar, our presenter.
Okay, Cody, stay with me in case I have problems getting the
I
PowerPoint.
will.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. It's a really small group, so we can make this interactive. If you have any questions or comments, please put it in the chat, or you can welcome to turn on your video and talk. So, my name is Andrea Dar, and I am with JBS International, and I'm one of the founding members of Handle with Care. So I'm going to talk to you about Handle with Care today. How many of you all, could you put in the chat or raise your hand? How many of you have heard of Handle with Care before? Anybody? Carlos has. You have Handle with Care in your county. Catherine, where are you? Let's see if she puts it back in. Where are you, Catherine? Mercer County, West Virginia. Yes, you do. Y'all are doing a great job there. You've got an officer named Truckenmiller that's doing wonderful things. Hi, Catherine. Yeah, tell Truck I said hi. Anyone else have Handle with Care? Scott, are you the Scott from Texas by any chance?
No, I'm with OJJDP. Just listening
Oh,
into that. Thanks.
okay. Thank you. All righty. Well, some of you have heard of it and some of you haven't, so I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. How am I doing, Cody?
Doing great.
Okay, everyone can see the screen in slideshow mode. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and here's all my contact information if you'd like that. My background, just so you know, is victim assistance. So I started out years ago doing direct services in a prosecutor's office, direct services to victims of crime, violence, and abuse. And I went on to manage a couple of grants that really focused on child maltreatment. And with those grants, I had a task force that met quarterly, and we talked about the issues in the field, what everyone was facing. We tried to see what the barriers were to better outcomes for kids. And I did that for years and years and years until I retired. So I just wanted to let you know all that because Handle with Care was created in a subcommittee in that task force. So all my whole work has always been victim assistance, and it's always been focused on children. So what is Handle with Care? Handle with Care is an identification, notification, and support strategy implemented by first responders, schools, and mental health to help provide safe and supportive academic environments for children recently exposed to traumatic events. That's a very long way of saying that we want to minimize negative outcomes from traumatic events as quickly as possible. That's the focus of Handle with Care. We all know when we've been through something traumatic, we're rattled, we're upset, we feel sort of out of control, we don't feel safe. So just imagine if you were a little kid and traumatized and didn't even have the words to explain what's going on to yourself or to anybody else. So the focus of Handle with Care is really minimizing negative outcomes from traumatic events they've been exposed to. I told you a little bit about where Handle with Care came from, but the bigger version of that is that in 2009, while I still had this task force and I was still working in child maltreatment issues, there was a big survey that came out by OJJDP, and it found that 60% of children had been exposed to crime, violence, and abuse in their home schools and communities, and 40% had been direct victims of 2 or more violent acts. That was a wake-up call. That was letting everyone know trauma is so prevalent in the lives of children. So after that survey came out, then the Attorney General Eric Holder launched the Defending Childhood Initiative. and charging all states to come up with some, look at this survey. This is an epidemic. What can we all do to help and support these children? So in 2011, my really good friend Tracy Dorsey Chapman at the U.S. Attorney's Office in West Virginia, Southern District of West Virginia, called me and said, hey, why don't we come up with our own Defending Childhood initiative? We already have a task force with all the players at the table. Let's just create a subcommittee and come up with our own. And that's what we did. Tracy's a big proponent of not reinventing the wheel. So she said, let's just look at programs all over the country, defending childhood initiatives, and see what's working and see what parts of those we need for our state. And we had a big problem with the perfect storm of poverty and substance misuse. It was just devastating in West Virginia, especially on the lives of children. So we looked at programs, and we saw a program in Brockton, Massachusetts called the Red Envelope Project, which we really liked. And we liked it because it started with a notification from law enforcement to the school anytime law enforcement interacted with children at the scene, but it was only about domestic violence. So their whole Red Envelope Project only dealt with domestic violence. And of course, we had other issues, like we all do, more issues that we really needed to focus on. And as I said, our big issue was the drug crisis and poverty. And so we took the notification for the first part of our program, and we really liked the fact that schools needed to be the place where the intervention was. Why? Because kids have to go to school, because they have a ride there, right? You don't even have to worry about transportation for the most part. And so we wanted the school to be the intervention, the place for the intervention. And the third part is we wanted children that really needed to talk to a therapist to have access to mental health providers. So those were the things that we looked at. We put them all together in a way that worked for us, and we called it Handle with Care. Then we spent, because it just makes sense, right? Handle with care, you get it. It sort of explains itself when you hear those words. So we put it all together, and then we had to run it by all of our bosses, all the attorneys, all the policy people, all the people that had power to say yes or no, you can or cannot do this. So when we first started out, it looked quite a bit different than it does now, because everyone was like, you can't do this because it violates confidentiality, or you can't do this because you might jeopardize victim safety, and you can't do that because it violates my policy. It might not violate yours, but it violates mine, and I'm not going to be able to participate. So after everyone had their say, they stripped it down to 3 words: handle with care. That's all we could do, is get handle with care from the scene of a police incident and over to the school. And it turns out that's all you really need, is 3 words: handle with care, to be able to really help and support children. So we worked in our heads. We decided, well, let's pilot it. Let's see if it'll work in the field just like we think it should work. And we picked a school in Charleston, West Virginia, and it was a school in a very high crime neighborhood. And we thought, well, this is what we need to do. If this is going to make a difference, let's put it in a place where there's going to be a lot of notices. And once we went there, we did some training, and the teachers and the staff just really, really liked this program. It just took the guesswork out of wondering if that child was off that day or what was going on. So we piloted, and then we decided to go statewide. And as we did that, we were getting calls from all over the country. And so in West Virginia, we've got it in most counties in West Virginia. And country-wise, it's in San Diego, California. It's in 3/4 of the counties in Michigan. It's in Oklahoma, Maryland, Florida. So this has traveled very quickly across the country. Why? Because it's smart. It works. It really doesn't cost any money, and children benefit from this so much. We're just able to really reach the kids we need to. So that's where Handle with Care came from. A phone call, literally a phone call from my friend Tracy to me, and here is a program all over the country, which we're very proud of. I'm preaching to the choir, so I don't have to go into the ACEs, but I want people to remember it's not just those adverse childhood experiences in the household challenges, but it's also adverse community experiences: poverty, discrimination, lack of opportunity, poor housing, violence. And I was doing a presentation one time, and someone said, would you please put grief in there? Our children are grieving. Our families are grieving from so many things. So I've added grief in there. Well, two things that the pandemic really brought to the forefront was the fact that food insecurity and housing instability were both two huge issues during the pandemic. So I wanted to add those. So all of these things can affect our children. How do they affect our children? Well, health and learning impacts of ACEs. ACEs are common, right? 61% of adults had at least one ACE, and 16% had 4 or more ACEs. We know it's linked to chronic health problems, mental illness, substance misuse in adulthood. It can affect students' learning and behavior in the classroom, and this is what I really want you to see. Children with 3 or more ACEs are 5 times more likely to have attendance issues, 6 times more likely to have behavior problems, and 3 times more likely to experience academic failure. So ACEs are linked directly to kids at school, and just further documenting we've got to do something to help these kids. So the problem, traumatized children struggling in school. Trauma is prevalent. We've already talked about that. Trauma undermines a child's ability to learn, to form relationships, and to function appropriately in the classroom. You know, if a kid is in school, they need to learn. They need the language. They need to pick up on social cues. They need all kinds of things. And a lot of times for us in West Virginia, like I said, that poverty and that substance misuse, children were falling behind. They had developmental delays there. Forming relationships. If you're at home and the people charged to take care of you are creating situations that are very difficult for you, you're going to have trust issues. You're going to have trust issues with everyone that you come in contact with. And the last thing there was functioning appropriately in the classroom. A lot of these kids have never been taught how to act appropriately anywhere. So what happens at home happens at school. If at home you solve your problems by yelling, screaming, and kicking, and you come to school and do that, what happens? You get in trouble, right? So it really does, again, undermines that child's ability to learn, form relationships, and function appropriately in the classroom. A lot of times these kids get labeled as the bad kids or the troublemakers, and they're often punished because that's what that behavior looks like. For them, that behavior is survival, but in the classroom, that behavior is making them the troublemakers. They often give up and never make it to graduation. I heard our superintendent one time in West Virginia say that the biggest problem that we have here is attendance, simply getting those kids to school. So it is a problem that has to be addressed. Trauma changes things. A lot of times when we think about trauma, we think about the event, like a school shooting or a domestic violence situation, or, whatever it is that causes this trauma. But we often forget that's just the event. There's so much fallout from a traumatic situation. A lot of times it can change where they live. It can change where they go to school. It can change who they're living with. It can change, daily routines. You can end up living with injury, disability to themselves or others, and often there are ongoing criminal and civil proceedings. So it is disruptive to their whole life. So I'm going to share something with you in my history that kind of will drive this point home. When I was 5 years old, my father died. He was 37 years old and he died. That in and of itself is traumatic. But if I left out one little piece of this information. We lived in Bangkok, Thailand. So not only did my father die, we lost our home, our friends, our environment, our culture, our food, everything just disappeared overnight. And I'm saying this because it's a great example for people to understand trauma changes things. It can change your whole life. So it's not just the event, it's the fallout from that. But trauma does turn off that learning switch. When you're experiencing trauma, the kids in the classroom aren't able to learn. They're not able to take in that information and process it and retain it. They have, as I said, high rates of absences, decreased reading ability, lower GPA, inability to act appropriately. They often have suspensions and expulsions, which is the last thing we want. We need those kids to be in the classroom and learning, and a lot of times their behavior gets them kicked out of the classroom. and can also lead to academic failure and subsequent dropping out. So let's keep those kids in school. School is an important setting. Almost daily, schools have contacts with kids. I always say, who knows more about the kids than the parents? And it's usually the teachers and staff at school. And when I say staff, it's the lunch ladies, it's the bus drivers, it's the custodians. Those are the people that the kids talk to. And often school is the only safe place in this child's whole world. School can have tremendous power to help calm that child down and make that child feel safe and build resiliency, but it also has the capacity to re-traumatize the child if teachers and staff don't understand what they're seeing is in fact trauma and not bad behavior. What can they do to help that child? Education positions children for success, and education can provide a solid foundation. When they're at school, they're learning reading, writing, arithmetic, history, but they're also learning problem solving and time management and learning all kinds of things that they need in life. We need to keep them there. A high school diploma is a standard requirement for most jobs and higher education. The longer these kids are in school, the more opportunities that they're going to have. And lastly, schools are often the only place some kids get a meal during the day. So nutrition, healthcare, role models, things happen at school, and we need to keep the kids in school so they can have access to all that. I want to talk a little bit about the drug crisis. Like I said, we were hit very heavily in West Virginia. But when you talk about the drug crisis, if I talk to law enforcement about the drug crisis, what are they going to think of? They're going to think of arrests, overcrowding of jails. If you talk to emergency medical services about the drug crisis, they immediately go to getting to them and getting Narcan into whoever that is, keeping them alive so they can get to treatment. If you talk to public health about the drug crisis, they think about increases in hepatitis B and C and HIV. If you talk to Child Protective Services about the drug crisis, they're going to think of, removal of those children, and there's really running out of spaces to put those children. So this drug crisis meant so many different things to so many different disciplines, but people were not making the connection that the drug crisis was blowing up the classrooms. And when I present this, I say, you might think it's not your child being in the classroom disrupting everything, but I guarantee you your child is sitting next to a child who's dysregulated, and the teacher's spending all their time redirecting that behavior instead of teaching. So nobody is learning in the classroom. 1 in 4 children have experienced a traumatic event that affects their behavior in the classroom. So it's very, very prevalent, and it has to be addressed. So our solution is handle with care. And as I said earlier, provide school with a notice when they've been on the scene and children are present and children have been exposed to a traumatic event. And they provide that notice so that the staff can handle the child with care, buffering and mitigating negative impacts. It's a really simple notice, and it can help support a child so much, their well-being and their academic success, and it's very, very simple. In fact, it's so simple it goes over a lot of people's heads. It takes a while to get into the content of handle with care and really understanding until you see all the benefits. So let me give you an example. It's 2 in the morning. 911, call for service, please come. Maybe it's a domestic situation, and maybe one parent needs to go to the hospital. Maybe one parent has to go to jail. Maybe the kid goes next door to grandma's house, or maybe the child has to pack up everything in a bag and go into foster care. But regardless of this whole situation, odds are, where's that child the next day? All right, y'all are thinking it, you're just not saying it, but odds are they're at school the next day. And what could happen at school when the child gets there? What is the student doing? Do they have their homework? Are they worried about their caregivers? Did they forget to study for the test? Are they tired? Are they hungry? Does their belly hurt? And yes, that's the #1 thing for the elementary schools. The kids don't know what's going on, but they always end up in the nurse's office with the belly ache or a headache. They're staring off into space. They can be short-tempered. What's the teachers and the staff thinking? What are they thinking and saying to this kid? And I'm not saying this always happens, but a lot of times it does happen. Teachers and staff, where's your homework? Why didn't you study for the test? This is a thing with you over and over. Why don't you come to school prepared? Can't you pay attention? Why are you trying to sleep in class? Are you not? Were you up playing video games all night long? You know, I'm not saying it's always that way, but it's very frustrating for the kids and for the teachers and staff. All the way around, it's frustrating when this is happening and no one knows what's going on or where that behavior is coming from. So you've got all these little kids at school and big kids at school, and they're trying, they're there, and they're carrying around their invisible suitcases of sickness and hunger and homelessness, and they're asking, can someone help me with these? I'm late for math class. So they're trying, but they have so many added burdens that it makes it very, very difficult. The three parts of this process I want to reiterate. Police on this and other first responders. Why did we add other first responders? Because of all the overdoses children are seeing. So EMS and the fire department and police are all sending handle with care notices now. So at the scene, if children are present, they're getting the child's name, age, and school, and getting that notice over to school, hopefully before the start of the next school day. When it gets to school, so you have to have that notice, right? First responders initiate that. Once it gets to the school, schools they're prepped with trauma-sensitive supports to identify handle with care students who exhibit the need for a little extra help. It can be a little bit, you know, maybe they just need to sleep. Maybe they need some food. Maybe they need someone to be kind to them, to acknowledge them. It can be little stuff that can really help a kid, but some of these kids are going to need to see a mental health provider. So our third part is we want accessible mental health services that with parental permission, children can access. That looks a little bit different in a lot of different ways. It's really hard. We're short-staffed on mental health providers. There are some that come into the school. There are some schools that have those services already in place. I've seen child advocacy centers actually get some of their therapists and get over to the school or provide the transportation for the kids to get to the CAC for those services. However that's going to happen, the key word is accessible. They need to be accessible for these kids. So that's the handle with care process. First responders, as I said, initiate it. When we first started this program, we didn't do so well. We were building the plane as we were flying it. And we used to say, if you think this child's been traumatized, send the notice. Well, that was the wrong thing to say. Who are we to judge someone else's trauma, right? Trauma is trauma. It's not our place to judge. And also, officers don't think that way. That's not how they're trained. That's not how they respond. That's not how they think. So we just say, now, if children are present, yes or no. If yes, name, age, and school. That's all we need officers to do, name, age, and school, and get it over to the school. Before handle with care, when officers were at the scene, they had one tool in their tool belt. One tool. Do we know what that is? A mandated report, right? That's really the only thing they had that they could use. Most children don't rise to that level of needing a mandated report. They don't meet that criteria, and subsequently they are never identified and they never get services. But with handle with care, they've got another tool in their tool belt. They're actually doing something that's really going to help the kid, and no one else can do it but them because they're first on the scene. If law enforcement or other first responders are there and children are present, those children are the ones that are most at risk. In the past, we never knew anything about it. But now we have this simple tool that just says handle with care. So we can really identify all the children. You know, we'll never be able to identify them all, but at least that's going to put us in the right direction, and it really does help. Want to make sure everyone understands a handle with care notice does not take the place of a mandated report. These are two separate things. If the mandated report needs to be made, you need to make it. And then we just need handle with cares on all the kids. What does this communication look like from the law enforcement officer over to the school? It can look a lot of different ways, but you've got an officer at the scene and they've generated a handle with care, and we need to get it up through the chain of command and over to the school before the start of the next school day. So when we piloted, we did it in Charleston, West Virginia with the Charleston Police Department. And I told you we picked Mary C. Snow Elementary. We created this little form And it says it's a handle with care notice. And after about 6 months, I added that wording right in the middle of it. And it says, if you're getting this notice, this child was on the scene of a police incident in the last 24 hours and might exhibit academic, emotional, or behavioral problems. Please handle with care. And early on, I would have people come up to me and say, I've never heard about this program and I didn't know what it was, but I got this notice and I knew exactly what to do. So literally the notice just keys school staff to know this child might be out of sorts that day to please handle with care. The trick is, how are you going to get it from the law enforcement officer up through the chain of command and over to that school the next day? We need it timely. We need it before school starts. We need it before we have a meltdown in the classroom so we can prevent that meltdown in the classroom. And all communities, they do it all kinds of different ways. Let me back up. Some use, when we started, we were using emails and texts. We really relied on texts a whole lot. Actually, when we started this, the school, the lead school counselor generated an Excel spreadsheet with the principal at every school, the school nurse, and the school counselor, and turned it over to Charleston PD and the Sheriff's Department in August. And in January, updated it. So everyone had those contacts and they would email directly or text them directly. You need to remember first thing in the morning is when schools are really, really busy and principals are really, really busy. And a lot of times they're not going to check those, their email when kids are coming in. So a lot of times principal will have a designee to do it. But those notices need to be there first thing in the morning. You can do it by text, by email. You can do it. Some people go through 911 and just have those contacts at 911 and 911 can forward that. San Diego has developed a very secure app and you have to be really careful with that because these notices don't go into permanent files. They're not saved. They're not in a database. The reason we're sending them is so that child can be identified and get extra care if they need them. We don't want them the notices saved in a personal file. So if you are creating an app or something like that, make sure those names fall off that app and you're not storing any of that data. So the first responder responsibility, literally just to provide the notification so the school staff can handle the child with care. Interpret exposed to trauma broadly, right? Well, as I said, we're not here to judge anyone's trauma. So I guarantee you, if first responders are there and children are present, that's going to be very unsettling for the child. Include the child's name, approximate age, and the school that they attend. We do age and not birthday because that's just way too much information. You're never, ever going to give details of what happened at the scene to the school. Never. That's not the point of this, and that's not our business. The business is the child's ability to learn when they come to school. So we respect children and families' privacy, and we reiterate that over and over and over. The details are not important. If you understand trauma, then you'll be able to help the child, and you don't need the details. A couple of things. When you're implementing this or you're thinking about implementing this, if your leadership is not on board, it's not going to happen. If it's not important to your chief, or it's not important to that school administrator, it's not going to happen. It's going to be one of those things that just don't get done. So you really need, it needs that push from leadership and put someone in charge of sending and receiving those notices that cares. I used to train with a law enforcement officer that he would say, you can't teach passion. You can't teach people passion about what they're doing in their work. So put people in charge who care. Another thing, I told you we did a couple of things wrong when we did this, but one thing we learned is we're asking first responders to send this notice over, but we're never telling first responders how helpful it was or anything on the back end that they were able to do. So feedback between schools and first responders is critical. Handle with Care provides a great way to demonstrate first responders' compassion in their communities. Again, the officer that helped us start this, he would say, he would tell his officers, you got to eat lunch too. Why don't you go to school? Go to Mary C. Snow and have lunch with the kids. Take your bikes and your motorcycles. Talk to them. Let children see you when nothing bad is going on. Let them see you as a friend in a community and that you're there to help them. To sum up the Handle with Care notice, again, only 3 words. I have to say it over and over and over because people have a hard time with that. They think they need more information. If we gave you more information, we wouldn't have a program. We'd violate all kinds of confidentiality. So that, 3 words is all you're going to get. No details are ever given. It should arrive before the start of the school day so you can prevent that meltdown. It's a need-to-know basis at the school. It is not everyone's business. You notice I didn't say send a handle care notice with the fax. Why? Faxes are usually right in the middle of an area where a lot of people can walk by and see it. So it's a need-to-know basis at the school. It does not stay in that child's permanent record, and it indicates that the child experienced an adverse event. It doesn't mean they experienced a criminal event. A lot of times people thought processes go straight to that, and that's not necessarily so. We also include child care serving agencies because the younger that child is, the more lethal that environment can be. And school internal handle with cares are very, very beneficial and have been going on for years. If the school staff hears maybe a child's grandparent has passed away, they've always let the teachers know and tried to be extra kind to that kid that day. So that's just one example of an internal handle with care notice. So when we started it, there were 55 counties in West Virginia, and there was one school district in every county. This is kind of the biggest problem with people trying to figure out how to implement it. There are some areas that have several school districts in one little area, several law enforcement municipalities. How do you design a program that that can work in a very timely fashion? Like I said, it was easy on us because each county had one school district. Might have had, Charleston has, in the surrounding areas, our county has 17 or 18 police municipalities, but it only had one school district, which made it easy. So we had one coordinator in every county. Law enforcement just notified that coordinator. They had the emails of every school principal, and that's how that worked. So when it gets to the school, it's only for the teachers who work with the child, the school counselor, and the school nurse. Other options are superintendents. When we started, the superintendent in Kanawha County said, I want a copy of every handle with care notice that comes in. And he also called the school that day in the afternoon to say, is that child okay? Is there anything you needed to do for that child? And again, optional is child care serving agencies. One thing that you have to stress when you're thinking about this program and you're going into schools, just because you receive a notice does not mean you approach that child. That's not what this is about. That you're going to be a silent observer watching, prepared to be proactive instead of reactive. If the child self-reports, that's a whole different thing, but it's not your business to question that child, dig for more information, ask someone to do a home visit. That's not what this is about. Don't pry. Just be extra kind. And if the child self-reports, then you can take care of things that way. Why are we doing this? Well, for a lot of reasons that I've explained, but one thing I haven't touched on a whole lot is that really and truly, schools sometimes are the only safe place in this child's whole world, the only safe place. A lot of times the only place where there's a present adult interacting with them, feeding them, helping them with their homework. So we don't want to turn it into a battle zone, and it's so easy to turn it into a battle zone when you're dealing with difficult behaviors that trigger the people in charge. So we want this schools to be safe. And when I say safe, a child can look in your eyes and know whether or not you're safe. They can kind of read that body language. So we want children to know they are always welcome and always appreciated at school. The 3 pillars of trauma-informed community: safety, safety, safety. That's the magic word. We need kids to feel safe. That's what calms them down. That's what makes them feel secure. Connections to caring adults and ability to manage the emotions. That's, in a nutshell, what we need to do at school with these kids. You just change turn on a different lens. The traditional view at school, there's a child acting out. Well, maybe that's a dysregulated child that's been experiencing something very difficult. Traditional view, that child has anger management problems, when in fact that's just the fight, flight, or freeze response coming out for that child. We may look at that child and say, they're willful, they're naughty, Well, that's just maladaptive behaviors that they figured out to get by. So I'm not going to read this whole list to you, but that's what we mean by trauma-informed view. Not looking at it so negatively, but looking at it as all behavior is some form of communication. What is this child trying to communicate to me, and how can I help them? We can't get there at school if only one classroom is trauma informed, or a teacher here or there is doing that, and then the kid goes out in the hall and gets yelled at by someone for whatever reason. If the whole school's not on board, it's not going to work. If the child gets a different message from everybody they interact with, it's not going to work. We need the whole school staff on board with that trauma-informed lens to help the kids. What if school interventions are not enough? This is the therapy room at Mary C. Snow, and all that furniture that you see was donated and built by the inmates at Mount Olive Correctional Facility in West Virginia. One of those people said they never thought they could help a kid from inside those walls, but they did, and this is what they created for the kids at Mary C. Snow. So we thought the therapist, we got the room, we thought the therapist would be there maybe one day a week, and it turns out the therapist was there 3 and 4 days a week. I never thought the mental health part was really going to work. I thought, what caregivers are going to allow their kids to talk to a therapist at school? And my friend Tracy said, you are so wrong. Even parents that aren't what the best parents want what's best for their children, and they will access those services if they're made available. And sure enough, they did. So one of the last points I want to make is handle with care is so tied to school safety. A couple years ago, I started getting calls to come present at prevention resource officers conferences and the I Love You Guys Foundation and Safe and Supportive Schools, or Safe Schools. But I thought, why are they calling me? And it turns out Handle with Care is the first line of defense to keep those kids, to keep schools safe. It prioritizes the mental health needs of students. And that's why they were calling, and that's why I was there. So since then, I've learned a lot about it. You know, students who feel they don't matter are less, or children who feel like they matter are less likely to feel isolated and ostracized and alone. A lot of times when the kids do feel ostracized and alone, they lash out. It's a common response, and it can leave the child feeling not safe and the whole school community feeling not safe. So making the kid feel valued goes a long way with altering threats to individuals and the lives of others. But Handle with Care, and it's perfect because school safety is such a priority for our law enforcement communities. Handle with Care is just a perfect little bridge to blend those two programs together. So in summary, Handle with Care identifies the kids most at risk. If first responders are there and kids are there, they are the kids that are most at risk. It provides teachers with a heads up so they can be proactive instead of reactive. It connects children with accessible mental health services if needed. And it strengthens and improves relationships in the community. I had one of my Handle with Care coordinators who happened to be a PRO, prevention resource officer in a school, say, people just don't understand. Handle with Care starts conversations that you would never have had prior to Handle with Care, and it just makes everyone's job so much easier. But the bottom line is it improves academic, social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes for kids, and that's why we're doing it. It's going to increase, academic performance, behavior at school. All the good stuff is going to go up and all the bad stuff is going to go down. The disruptions, the expulsions, because we're addressing the child's needs. A couple of things I want to end on is lessons learned over the last 10 years. And the first is, don't make this complicated. It's not complicated. And for those of you that are interested in this, one of the first things that happens is they make it complicated. So that's not what this is about. We have a model of fidelity. If you follow it, it will work. There's a lot of thought that went into that. There were a lot of meetings, conversations, and like I said, it looked much different in the beginning, but now there's a simple model of fidelity to follow. Respect children and families' privacy. Please don't ask for details. I have to say that, and I know I've said it a million times today, but please respect the family's privacy. Be wary of Handle with Care trainings and apps that have no ties to this program. There's a couple of people with apps that they're actually saying use this for Handle with Care, and and one of those kept the database of all those kids and was making it searchable for people, which I don't know how in the world they were able to do that. But just be wary of that. And the last thing is there's always going to be a bump in the road. In the United States, there's all kinds of different communities, all kinds of different ways of doing things. And there's always going to be a bump in the road, but just know there's a workaround to it because Handle with Care works. It can work anywhere. So don't get frustrated. Sometimes it's just a process. In Savannah, Georgia, the people leading Handle with Care there, they just tell everyone it's a garden that has to be tended. You just can't plant it and walk away. You have to tend this garden. So in closing, success in school is success in life. Let's help children succeed every day to the best of their ability. Handle with Care helps them get through that day, that week, that month, that year to graduation. That's the whole goal of Handle with Care. So with that, there's my contact information again, if you want to take that down. And I'm going to stop the share and see if anyone has any questions or comments. Anybody? Was this helpful, I hope?
Hello, Andrea.
Hi.
How are you? I'll speak up real quick. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yeah,
Hi,
I think it
Scott.
was really, yeah, great. It was really helpful. I'm involved with some of the work on our children exposed to violence work, as well as our STOP funded work, which we use to focus on school climate work. It's enhancing school capacity to address youth violence. And I just really wanted to underscore how much I appreciated the fact that you said like the schools is really that opportunity to really provide some preemptive supports, right? And it's just it's a tremendous link. So I'm hopeful that this year our solicitation will again kind of be out on the street. But I just wanted to flag that I think that enhancing school capacity funding is a real way to look at implementing things like programs like Handle with Care, whether it be a school that wants to connect with the CBO and the school be the prime in terms of the applicant, or if the CBO wants to connect with the school and you know what I mean, and be the applicant, the prime applicant. Either way, I just think it's really important to get these evidence-based practices like out into the community. So I mean, it's clear to me that this Handle with Care model has done that, and I think that's it's just really great. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share a couple of things. I just wanted to make a couple of connection points about the work that we have going forward and how much it really ties in with implementation work.
And I appreciate your comments. People don't realize how Handle with Care just kind of builds this infrastructure with all these initiatives that we're trying to do, and it joins them all together. And it's so simple. Literally, it is so simple to do if you follow the model of fidelity. So I help with a lot of people doing implementation because we've done it everywhere, and we can anticipate what's coming down the road and what they're going to have to work around. And you can get off to a misstart very easily. A lot of people don't realize law enforcement have their own language. And if you march in there and you don't speak that language, you're not going to get very far with them. So there's lots of, you're nodding your head, Joy. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. The blue wall is real. So if you don't crack it, you're not going to get any help. So I was just agreeing
Right.
with you 100%.
Yeah, and I always say, take one of them with you. Don't march in there on your own if you don't speak law enforcement. Take one of them with you. Right, Catherine? Truck and Miller. We tried for 6 years in Mercer County to get Handle with Care going. And the circuit court judge, Judge Swope, had me down there and gave everyone an invitation. And when the judge gives you an invitation, you come. And then what was that family court judge? Mary Beth?
Mary Ellen Griffith.
Mary Ellen had me down there, and she sent out her invitation, and 50 people in the room, and we do a presentation, not one Handle with Care. And I called all over Mercer, was down there several times, and all it took was a retired sheriff's department officer, Truck and Miller, and they got a small grant, and he turned out to be the liaison between schools and the law enforcement office. Bang, just like that. 50 notices a month started coming in because you had the right person and you connected with the right language to get that done.
And he's the right person. He and his wife are foster parents. He's been a child advocate. He's involved in Boy Scouts. It makes a difference, and he's respected across the county. Everyone knows him. It's seamless. Handle with Care for Us has also helped change how law enforcement officers are seen. You know, yes, they do see a lot of grown-ups on their worst day, but we're also changing it now. Their resources. Kids know the officers. Kids, especially know I'm with the city of Bluefield, know our canine officers and our canines. And so we've sort of broken down a lot of that, and not made law enforcement scary.
Good for you. Y'all are doing remarkable things. And you also have a great mental health agency there. I can't remember the lady's name.
Lisa Jones, Southern Highlands.
Yes, Southern Highlands. They do a
Yeah, and
great
they've got a
job.
mobile crisis unit that can roll out. Our CAC as well. Shiloh Woodard is exceptional.
She is. She is. Joy, where are you?
I am in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So we are recipients of and I work with Oklahoma Juvenile Affairs, and we are recipients of the Continuum of Care grant. So we are in the implementation processes of, building community agencies, family engagement, and just trying to develop or continue our web of support for our young people who are, involved in the juvenile justice system, and to make sure that they, access life as they should, rather than continuing or putting them in a funnel to get to the adult system. So we're trying to prevent that for sure, and just supporting them and supporting their families, because it's all a unit.
It is. Do you remember Paco?
Paco?
Law enforcement officer Paco? He started Handle with Care in Oklahoma elementary schools.
I might not know him because I'm pretty new to OJ. I'm not super new, but I'm still, maybe considered a rookie on the team. But Paco, I haven't heard him, but I would like to meet him. If I could meet him.
He moved on to California. He left.
Oh, okay. Well, he's
I
gone.
think.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's a great guy. I met him years ago, but he brought Handle with Care to Oklahoma City.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Andre, I'll just sort of reinforce many of the things that you said during the session today, and really again, and some things that Joy mentioned too. Really, the value of Handle with Care in its ability to change children's trajectories, right, and families' trajectories from heading towards justice systems or deeper involvement in justice systems to really life that has community supports, therapeutic supports, right? School-based supports, which can really change people's lives, right? And within the Continuums of Care initiative, these types of interventions and systems and infrastructure can be critical, right? For keeping kids out of juvenile justice systems, getting families the supports and resources that they need to stay out. And so just, you said it several times. I just wanted to reinforce it. And if folks have additional questions, right, please reach out to, your TA providers, and we can make additional connections with Andrea. We're really grateful that she's part of our team. And so we're happy to, again, provide that support. If you're thinking, if you're even thinking about, gosh, maybe this would work, maybe this is something we should at least consider, please reach out. We'll make those connections as part of our support. So, so thank you. Thank you, Andrea. That was awesome.
You're welcome. Joy, I do know people in Oklahoma City that can help you if you're interested in this.
If you can't, I don't know, I have your email down, adar@JBS International. I will email you. You can, because I wrote down, I need to find out who does Handle with Care now, since Paco's no longer here.
Yeah, I can connect you with some people that DHHR brought me there about 5 or 6 years ago. So they were kind of behind starting it there.
Okay. I will email you so you have my email information, and that way you can make the connection, or you can give me the right direction.
And I'll be glad to help you with anything I can. Okay. Just reach out.
Andrea, one more thing. I know that part of our COC work and focus is really looking at identifying sustainable options, right? And so if you wouldn't mind just spending a couple minutes talking about some of the successes that other jurisdictions have had with sustaining handle with care. I know, for example, just in talking with you previously, just integrating these systems into policies and require training for folks. I know those have been some of them, but if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about just how, folks have been successful in sustaining handle with care.
You're really successful, like I said, when you get leadership on board to help you. And I'm going to give you an example. Is in San Diego, the prosecutor's office in San Diego, California, reached out to me, and they wanted to start Handle with Care program. And they started it from the churches. I remember having a meeting with a lot of the community members, and they got it in place, and they had that leadership from the top, and they had that community around them. And it was very simple for them to just go district by district to get that in place. When you start Handle with Care, the biggest problem is everyone likes it. Everyone wants to help kids. Everyone's on board. But getting those notices coming over and over and getting the officers to understand just how critical it is that they just take that 3 minutes to get that information and send it over. So, it's not hard. It doesn't take a lot of training. It doesn't take a lot of work. We need trauma-informed environments for these kids, but that's not a destination. That's not a checklist that you can check off. It's a journey. It's a constant learning. And everyone has mental health providers in their community that can do trainings and help staff learn all about trauma and what they can do. So is that kind of hitting the things you wanted me to, Carlos?
Yeah, absolutely. The other things that I'll just mention from, what we've talked about before is, those coordinators, or having those roles of coordinators sort of be institutionalized in different places, whether that's at the school or with law enforcement. And over time, it just sort of becomes part of that aspect of work and doesn't have to function separately, right, as its own thing.
Right.
This just becomes part of the duties of a certain role. And then the training policies. I know that many of the law enforcement jurisdictions that you've worked with have made Handle with Care training a requirement of, what officers do. So now it's just standard training, right? It doesn't require any other outside person to come and do this thing. It's just sort of integrated in their regular work. And so again, these are just examples of how this can be a really long-term and easily sustainable approach to, steering kids and families away from JJ and into community supports and resources.
When we talk about a coordinator, one of the biggest reasons you need a coordinator is someone has to drive the bus. Someone has to know who's participating and who's not participating. And the only way to do that is to have a point person that kind of those notices pass through so they can see which departments are sending them and which departments aren't. And the ones that aren't, what can we do to get them on board? So, yeah. If you get a good coordinator in there that really kind of stays on top, and it's not a lot of work, just stays on top of it, make sure that everyone gets in the habit, and once they're in the habit, you're home free. It's just part of their job. And literally, it makes everyone's life easier, Joy. It makes the officer's life easier, it makes school staff life, it makes everyone's life easier. It's so simple. Like I said, it goes over the top of people's heads. You just got to hear it a couple of times before you understand all the benefits. I'm so glad you all joined us today. And if I can help you at all, just reach out, adar@jbsinternational.com. I'd be glad to help you.